The call came in just after sunrise, when the air still held some coolness from the night. I work with a small wildlife response unit that handles human-animal conflicts in rural areas near the river basin. The message was short and frantic. Huge mutant python attacking a monitor lizard near the irrigation canal. The word mutant made me sigh. In my experience, mutant usually means bigger than expected. Still, a large python is nothing to dismiss. I grabbed my gloves, snake hook, restraint pole, and radio, and headed out with 2 others from our team. The canal runs along the edge of rice fields, bordered by scrub and scattered trees. When we arrived, a handful of farmers stood at a distance, pointing toward a patch of flattened grass near the water. No one was shouting, which was good. Panic escalates everything. As we approached, I saw movement slow, heavy coils tightening around something thrashing. The python was large, likely over 12 feet, thick, bodied and patterned in dark browns and golds. Caught in its grip was a monitor lizard, maybe 4 feet long, tail whipping wildly. Monitor lizards are tough animals. This one had probably wandered too close while hunting along the canal. They're opportunistic and bold, sometimes too bold. The farmers called it greedy, saying it had been raiding chicken coops. Maybe that was true, but at that moment it wasn't greed. It was survival. The python had wrapped 2 full coils around the lizard's torso, tightening in steady pulses. The lizard's jaws snapped defensively, but it was losing leverage. I felt the familiar tension settle in my chest. We needed to act carefully. Intervening in a natural predation event isn't something we take lightly, but this was happening close to homes, and the python itself posed a future risk if it remained in the area. We spread out without speaking much. One teammate moved to the rear to monitor the snake's head. I stayed to the side, watching the coils. The python's head was elevated slightly, tongue flicking rapidly, eyes fixed on the lizard's neck. It hadn't begun swallowing yet. It was still constricting. That gave us a small window. If it had started feeding, extraction would have been more complicated. The ground was damp and uneven, and I reminded myself not to rush. A misstep could redirect the snake's attention toward us. The first step was controlling the head. My teammate used the snake hook to gently pin it behind the jaw while keeping distance from the strike range. The python reacted instantly, releasing some tension from its coils and shifting attention. That brief loosening allowed the lizard to twist slightly, but not enough to escape. I moved in carefully with the restraint pole, securing the snake's neck more firmly. It hissed, not loudly, but enough to communicate displeasure. The strength in its body was obvious. This was no mutant creature, just a powerful, mature python doing what pythons do. With the head controlled, the real challenge was unwinding the coils. Pythons don't let go easily. Each loop had to be peeled back slowly, starting from the tail end. The third member of our team knelt near the outer coil and began lifting it inch by inch. The snake tightened reflexively each time we applied pressure. The lizard's movements had slowed. Its sides were barely expanding. I could see minor bleeding near its shoulder where scales had been scraped raw. I kept my focus on maintaining control of the head. If that slipped, we'd have 2 problems instead of 1. The first coil came free after several long seconds. The lizard gasped in an almost human way, drawing in air sharply. That sound sharpened my urgency, but I forced myself to stay steady. The python attempted to rewrap, muscles bunching under my grip. I adjusted my stance, leaning more weight into the pole without harming it. Sweat ran down my back despite the early hour. The farmers had fallen completely silent now, watching from about 20 yards away. The second coil was harder. The snake had anchored part of its body against a root near the canal bank. We had to shift position to loosen its leverage. My teammate used both hands to lift and rotate the coil while I kept the head immobilized. For a moment the python's tail whipped across my boot, knocking me off balance. I caught myself before falling forward. That small stumble reminded me how quickly things can change. We weren't heroes. We were 3 people trying not to make a mistake. When the second coil finally released, the monitor lizard managed to twist onto its belly. It didn't flee immediately. Shock, most likely. Its limbs trembled as it tried to orient itself. The python still had partial contact around its midsection. We worked on the final wrap, fingers digging into tough scales, separating muscle from muscle. I could feel the strength in the snake's body, the slow contractions designed for suffocation. It wasn't malicious, it was methodical. The final coil came free abruptly. The lizard jerked sideways and scrambled a short distance before collapsing near a bush. It was breathing heavily, sides heaving, eyes wide but focused. We didn't chase it. Our immediate priority was securing the python fully before it redirected its strike toward the injured lizard or us. With coordinated movement, we shifted our hold, guiding the snake into a large containment bag designed for relocation. It resisted body tensing and flexing, but without the leverage of a prey item, its power was manageable. Once contained, we knotted the bag and placed it in a ventilated crate. Only then did we approach the monitor lizard. It attempted to crawl away when we neared, which was a good sign, stronger than it looked. We observed from a short distance instead of grabbing it. Wildlife protocol discourages unnecessary handling, especially when stress levels are high. After a few minutes, it pulled itself into thicker brush, moving slowly but independently. There were no obvious broken limbs. It would likely survive. The farmers approached cautiously, peppering us with questions about the mutant. I explained calmly that it was a reticulated python, large but not abnormal for the region. Size often looks exaggerated during an encounter. Fear stretches perception. We measured it later at just over 13 feet. Impressive, yes, but not unnatural. I emphasized that leaving food, waste, and livestock unsecured draws predators closer. The term greedy lizard came up again, and I reminded them that both animals were simply following instinct. We transported the python several miles away, deeper into a protected wetland area far from homes. During the drive, I could hear it shifting inside the crate, muscles sliding against fabric. Relocation isn't perfect. Some animals attempt to return, but moving it away from a high conflict zone gives everyone a better chance. When we released it near dense vegetation, it paused briefly before gliding into tall reeds, disappearing with surprising quiet for something so large. Back at the canal, the flattened grass and disturbed mud were the only signs of what had happened. The farmers resumed their work, though with more frequent glances toward the water. I felt the fatigue settle in once the adrenaline faded. My forearms were sore from gripping the restraint pole. One of my teammates laughed softly and said, "Not a mutant after all." I nodded. Situations like that rarely feel dramatic while they're happening. They feel technical, focused, controlled through routine. Later that evening, I wrote the report. Large reticulated python removed from irrigation canal area following predation attempt on monitor lizard. Both animals survived. python relocated to protected habitat. On paper, it sounded simple. In reality, it was a careful balance, intervening just enough to reduce risk without turning the scene into chaos. I kept thinking about how easily the story could have been told differently. Giant mutant snake, heroic battle, greedy lizard punished. None of that felt accurate. What I saw was two wild animals intersecting in a space shaped by human expansion. We stepped in not to play heroes, but to prevent escalation. Sometimes that's enough.